I'd next like to discuss the all-seeing eye as a symbol. I'd like to read a series of 4 quotes by Masons that I have found in my research without identifying the author, but all of these discuss the all-seeing eye. So let's read these quotes one after the other to show you how important the all-seeing eye is. The eye was also the symbol of Osiris. By the way, Osiris, in fact, we'll read the next quote. Osiris, the sun and principle of good. Osiris was the chief god of the Egyptians. Osiris was the sun. And the last quote was, an unopened eye in honor of the great eye of the universe, the sun. So the eye is a symbol of the sun god, and the sun god is Lucifer. And here we see an all-seeing eye on the back of our dollar bill above the pyramid. And all of this was known to the Masons who designed the Great Seal of the United States in 1782. Earlier in this lecture, I quoted the Masonic teaching from Albert Pike that taught us this: what is superior is as that which is inferior, and what is below is as that which is above. The Masons want us to believe that the eye is a symbol of a good God. We think that means the God of the Bible, but the Mason knows that to understand what they say, you must reverse the meaning of their words. That means that the eye is a symbol of an evil God. Their God is just the opposite of what the public thinks. I would like to remind you of this drawing that Rex Hutchins put in his book entitled A Bridge to Light. We examine it when you flip it over, and here we see the demon god that the Masons worship. So the observer who is not a Mason can now understand much of their writings if the meanings of their words is reversed. For instance, if you reverse the following quote, it really starts to make sense. This quote appeared in the New Age magazine published by the Masons for September 1950, just 5 years after World War II. This quote reads as follows: God's plan, and once again, if you reverse it, he's talking about the plan of Lucifer, is dedicated to the unification of all races, religions, and creeds. This plan, dedicated to the new order of things, is to make all things new. A new nation, a new race, a new civilization, and a new religion. A non-sectarian religion that has already been called the religion of the great light. And you might remember, as we pointed out before, Lucifer was the light bearer. Let's continue with the quote. Looking back into history, we can easily see that the guiding hand of providence, and here we mean Lucifer, has chosen the Nordic people to bring in and unfold the new order of the world. Records clearly show that 95% of the colonists were Nordics, Anglo-Saxons. Providence, reversed once again, means Lucifer has chosen the Nordic race to unfold the new age of the world, a novus ordo seclorum. This is God's, and once again reverse it, meaning Lucifer's great plan in America for the dawn of the new age of the world. Remember that this article was written just 5 years after World War II. Those familiar with what Adolf Hitler talked about will notice that the two thoughts were identical. So here we found some evidence that the Masons want the same thing that Adolf Hitler wanted. In a few moments, I'm going to present you the information that Adolf Hitler was a Luciferian. He worshipped Lucifer, also known as Satan or the devil. Also remember what the Satan-worshipping Hitler said. He wanted to create a new world order that was intended to destroy all religions, just like George Bush. They both wanted the same thing. According to the Masons and Adolf Hitler, the Nordic Aryan race would lead the world into a new world order. Remember that this article was written just 5 years after the conspiracy financed the madman Hitler and caused World War II. It seems as if some of the Masons know the truth. Next, I would like to discuss the serpent as a symbol used by the Masons in America. This is once again the book written by Jim Shaw, a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason, entitled The Deadly Deception. Mr. Shaw is perhaps the first 33rd degree Mason to break with the order, and he has written this book to expose part of what he learned as a Mason. He talks about his initiation into the 33rd degree Masonic temple, into the 33rd degree inside the Masonic temple in Washington, D.C. He writes this: the interior walls are decorated with serpents. There are all kinds, some very long and large. Many of the Scottish Rite degrees include representations of serpents, and I recognize them amongst those decorating the walls. Notice that Mr. Shaw says that he saw serpents throughout the Masonic Lodge. He did not see the cross of the Christians or the Star of David of the Jews. He saw serpents. And this is a slide of the 33rd degree temple in Washington, D.C., where Mr. Shaw was initiated. I took that slide myself, and unfortunately I had to put two slides together because I couldn't get close enough. And so it's a little bit different, but that's the building right there that's in just north of the White House in Washington, D.C., called the 33rd degree Masonic Temple in Washington. Notice the wall behind the outside columns in front of the building. This is a close-up of that symbol in the center. You can't see it very clearly, but it appears to be a painting of the Egyptian double-winged symbol we studied earlier in this lecture, but I cannot tell because it's simply too far away. This is a close-up of the area to the right side of the symbol, and I'm sorry the slide was taken sideways. We just looked at it. But if you'll notice there very carefully, there are clearly snakes on the wall, each maybe 6 feet high. Now there's the point, and there's the slide showing you that there's a snake right there behind the red arrow, and on the outside wall of the building. I darkened or lightened my picture by putting it on my Xerox machine. Now let's go to the inside of the building. This is a slide of the interior of the 33rd degree Masonic Temple. This came from a Masonic magazine. Notice the snakes coiled on the wall behind the men in the chairs on the right and the left upper. The head of each snake is in the middle near the top. I'm sure probably out of the picture on your on this TV. But this is a different view of the same room. And I have put red arrows near the 2 snakes on the wall behind the chairs. This is a close-up of one of the snakes behind the men in the chairs. And here you can just barely see the snake's head in the center with its mouth to the left. It's open. And then the rest of the snake is coiled around behind the men in the chairs. This is another picture of one of the many coiled snakes inside the Masonic Temple. This picture appears to be a smaller version of the one big picture shown behind the men in the chairs. You might ask why the Masons use the serpent as a symbol all over their temple. One Mason wrote this on page 63 of his book entitled Freemasonry and the Ancient Gods. He said, the serpent in our lodges is emphatically not there as an enemy of man. The traditional version of the serpent in the Garden of Eden is that he is a tempter of mankind. But as I've already discussed, the Masons are using the serpent as a symbol of a good God. Not only does the temple utilize the serpent as a symbol of the concealed God of the Masonic Lodge, they also utilize the sun as well. As I've said before, sun worship is not new. Now let's connect sun worship to the Masonic organization. Albert Mackey wrote this: sun worship was the oldest and by far the most prevalent of all the ancient religions. Hardly any of the symbols of Masonry are more important in their signification or more extensive in their application than the sun as the source of material light. It minds the Mason of that intellectual light of which he is in constant search. Masons understand that the sun is a symbol of something higher. The sun became an object of worship as a symbol of something else. One secret society that worshipped the sun was the Thule Society in Germany. The Thule Society. Adolf Hitler was a member of this group after joining it early in his life. I chose this picture of Adolf Hitler for a reason. Notice that the man appears to be a man possessed. I believe he was, and he was also an architect of evil, because Adolf Hitler was a worshiper of Lucifer. Hitler formed his Nazi party from members of the Thule Society. The committee and the 40 original members of the Nazi party were all drawn from the most powerful occult society in Germany called the Thule Society. And this is a slide of the symbol of the Thule Society. Notice that they use 2 major symbols. One was a spear or a dagger, and the other was a swastika. The spear appears to be a drawing of another spear called this one, the Spear of Destiny. This is an actual photograph of this spear. The spear is shown here in 3, well, actually, it's shown together, but there's 3 parts to it. The 2 spear points have been, which were once joined together, have broken into 2, and they made the sleeve shown on the left to keep the two parts together. Tradition has it that this is the spear that Longinus, the Roman soldier, used when he pierced the side of Jesus at the crucifixion. If you look carefully, you will see a long spike held in place by a wire wrapped around it on the spear on the left. It's also on the right, but the sleeve somewhat conceals it. But the legend is that this was the nail that was used to nail Jesus to the cross. In 1909, Adolf Hitler visited the museum in which the spear is kept in Vienna, Austria. He claims to have had a religious experience when he heard the museum guide explain the tradition of the spear. This is what Hitler wrote. And then I heard the words which were to change my whole life. There is a legend associated with this spear that whoever claims it and solves its secrets holds the destiny of the world in his own hands, for good or for evil. The guide went on to point out that it is claimed that these leaders of the past once possessed the spear. Charlemagne, Constantine the Great, Attila the Hun, and Julius Caesar. And another legend holds that Brutus used this spear to kill Caesar. Hitler claims that he realized at that moment that he was destined to possess the spear so that he could rule the world. It is known that the first country Hitler invaded in 1939 to start World War II was Austria, where the spear is kept, and he did indeed take possession of the spear. He kept it in Germany during the war, and it was found and returned to Vienna after the war was over. The Bible makes a connection between control of the world and the devil. This is what it says in Matthew chapter 4, verses 8 through 11. The devil taketh him, meaning Jesus, up into an exceeding high mountain, and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, and saith unto him, All things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. So the devil claims to have possession of all the kingdoms of the world, and that he will deliver those kingdoms to those who will bow down and worship him. Hitler determined that he had to possess the spear so that he could rule all of the kingdoms of the world. Hitler had stood before the spear and made an irreversible vow to worship evil. It is also interesting that Hitler controlled the spear until April the 30th, 1945, when he committed suicide. American soldiers found the spear in the basement of the Nuremberg castle and then kept it until it could be returned to Austria. It is while America held the spear that it dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, on innocent Christians. And I'm sure there are people claiming that's only a coincidence. It is known that Adolf Hitler had read the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, who had written a book entitled The Genealogy of Morals. And in this book, Mr. Nietzsche said this. The writer of the review of the book said, this book sought to make a reevaluation of all of man's values in the proof that so-called evil was good, and what it was habitually believed to be good was evil. Nietzsche also had written this in another book, I pronounce my judgment, I condemn Christianity. I raise against the Christian church the most terrible of all accusations that any accuser uttered. It is to me the highest conceivable corruption. Another of the teachers of Adolf Hitler was this man, Dietrich Eckart. Mr. Eckart was a dedicated Satanist and a supreme adept of the arts and rituals of black magic, and the central figure in a powerful and widespread circle of occultists, meaning the Thule Society. There's that quote there, that he was a dedicated Satanist. Eckart died in 1923, and just before he died, he was quoted as saying, Follow Hitler. He will dance, but it is I who have called the tune. I have initiated him into the secret doctrine, opened his centers in vision, and given him the means to communicate with all powers. Mr. Eckart continued, Do not mourn for me. I have influenced history more than any other German. So we can see who and what had influenced Adolf Hitler to start his goal of world conquest. The teachings of someone who renounced Christianity, and the spear of Longinus and its legend that whoever possessed it would rule the world. This is again the emblem of the Thule Society. Notice the use of the swastika behind the dagger, or the sword, or spear, what you want to call it. This time it is in a rounded form, but the basic swastika has two forms. This is called the good swastika when the arms rotate to the left. And this is the second swastika when you reverse the first. And this is called the evil or the Nazi swastika. This next quote is from page 66 of the book entitled Freemasonry and the Ancient Gods. It shows the two swastikas side by side, one labeled the swastika with the sun, and the other with the swastika against the sun. And the author goes on to say, the swastika represents today the sun. And once again, the S is capitalized, meaning a god. And it is known that Adolf Hitler personally selected this swastika for his Nazi party in Germany, because the swastikas are universally a symbol of the sun. Here is a picture, a color picture showing the swastika shown in this color photograph, and notice that they are now inside the white circle. Don't forget that the circle is a symbol of the sun, as is the swastika, which was placed inside it. But notice that the colors of the flag are red in the background, black in the swastika, and of course white behind the swastika. According to page 12 of a book entitled The Masonic Bible, the symbolic colors of the Royal Master Degree are black and red. I'm certain that there are critics right now saying that I'm making too much out of the two colors of red and black. But you have to explain why it is that both Adolf Hitler and the Masons worship the sun god Lucifer, both the Masons and the Nazis were into the occult, and both used the colors red and black as emblematic of something hidden from the public. I think there is a connection. That thought is repeated in Albert Pike's book entitled Morals and Dogma on page 786. Mr. Pike says this about the way that the Masonic temple is to be decorated when it is in the 28th degree, called the Night of the Sun, S-U-N, sun. In this degree, the columns of the hall are white with black and red. The hangings are black and over that crimson. The colors, black, white, and crimson, appear in the clothing. This is Bill Schneblin, a former male witch, a 32nd degree Mason, and a former endowed Mormon. He's written a book entitled Mormonism's Temple of Doom, a book that we will examine more in detail later in this lecture. But at this point, I want to point out one thing that Mr. Schneblin said that is very important now. He said this about the satanic ritual he was familiar with on page 22 of this little book. The lower levels of the Satanists wear black, the Magi wear scarlet or red, and the Magisters wear white. So scarlet, white, and black are significant colors throughout Masonry, witchcraft, and the Nazi Socialist Party of Adolf Hitler in Germany. But to show you that the swastika is in part a Masonic symbol, this is a quote from page Roman numeral 19 of the book entitled Freemasonry and the Ancient Gods. The author, who is a Mason, wrote this: "The swastika, one of the most ancient and sacred of symbols, has no place in speculative Masonry, although it still persists in operative lodges. Operative lodge Masons aver that the omission is due to the fact that Dr. Anderson, who framed the constitutions of speculative Masonry, never attained the rank of a master in an operative lodge and was therefore ignorant of the nature and meaning of the fourfold square." Notice that he was talking about a fourfold square. This is the Masonic symbol once again. This is a combination of the square and the compass. The square is two pieces of metal joined at a right angle so that the Mason can draw straight lines and 90-degree angles. And the swastika is four squares joined together at a central point. But to show you that the use of the swastika has not been eliminated and is still being used today, this is a letterhead of a group called the Religious Coalition for Abortion Rights Incorporated. On the back of this letter, the organization states that their logo combines the symbols of two great religions. This is a close-up photo of the back of this letter that I got in the mail. It goes on to say that the Christian cross is made up of many branches rather than two strokes to represent the many sects of Christianity. Its lower branch is part of a menorah, a symbol of the Old Testament, representing both the Jewish faith and the roots of Christianity. The cross and the menorah, this is in their own literature, on the back of the letter, the cross and the menorah are intertwined to demonstrate the unity of purpose of this coalition. The letterhead says that the following are members of this coalition: the American Jewish Congress, Catholics for a Free Choice, the Christian Church, meaning Disciples of Christ, the Episcopal Church, the National Council of Jewish Women, the Presbyterian Church of USA, meaning United States of America, presumably, the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, United Methodist Church, and the United Synagogue of America. So here we see some of the major Jewish and Christian organizations united to support a woman's right to an abortion. And they selected this logo as their symbol of unity. And there's the names on the bottom, some of those I just read. But they didn't tell you that their logo conceals a hidden swastika. So I cut the swastika out of their logo and put it off to one side and put the piece of pink paper behind. There is no question that it is there. You might want to ask your group, if I mention them by name, as to why they combined the Christian cross, the Jewish menorah, and the swastika when they formed their logo. Notice how they concealed a hidden swastika and that Jewish organizations supposedly did not see it. I'm sure it is just an artist's mistake and that the swastika is not really there. This is another use of the swastika. This is a drawing of an Indian thunderbird with a swastika shown on its chest. This drawing was part of a flyer prepared by Arizona's state-run Highway Commission prior to World War II. This symbol also appeared all over our state highways until Adolf Hitler used it in World War II and it was removed. This is a close-up of the thunderbird on the flyer, and the symbol is carrying a swastika on its chest. And this is a similar drawing of a thunderbird on another flyer put out by the Arizona Highway Commission. It also has a swastika on its chest. One of the original founders of the Thule Society was Rudolf von Sabbatendorf. He wrote this: "I intend to commit the Thule Society to this combat. I swear it on this swastika, on this sign which for us is sacred, in order that you hear it, O magnificent sun." So here we see that both the sun and the swastika are connected to the Thule Society. Notice that the Thule Society is engaged in a combat between the sun worshippers and the rest of the world. Adam Weishaupt created the Illuminati on May the 1st, 1776, May Day. May Day has traditionally become a holiday amongst the worshippers of the secret religion. Albert Pike told us why. He said the festival was in honor of the sun. The Illuminati worshiped the sun, and George Washington told us that the Illuminati worshiped the devil. The witches know why the 1st of May, called May Day, is important. The witch that wrote this book, entitled The ABCs of Witchcraft, wrote this: "There is a witch's custom of coming to a prehistoric English ring to see the sun rise on the morning of May Day. And the reason is because May Day is the traditional beginning of summer. But sun worship is a lot older than 1776. It is discussed in the Bible. This is Ezekiel chapter 8, verses 15 and 16, and it reads, "And he," meaning the Lord God, "brought me," meaning Ezekiel, "into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord were about 25 men with their backs towards the temple of the Lord. And these 25 men worshipped the sun toward the east. And then the Lord God called that practice, that worship of the sun toward the east, an abomination. These men had turned their back on the worship of the Lord and were worshiping the sun in the direction of the east." Notice the east is where the sun god rises each morning. That is why they worship towards the east. They were acknowledging his rebirth in the morning. Another mention of this practice is in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 2 through 4, and then 7. "If there be found among you any man or woman that hath gone and served other gods," and worship them, either the sun or the moon, and if it be true that such an abomination is wrought in Israel, so thou shalt put the evil away from among you. The God of the Bible told the people that there were sun worshippers in Israel, and that their worship was an abomination to the Lord, and that they were to put it away from amongst their midst. Yet the Masons worship the sun in the east. Albert Pike told us, our lodges are said to be due east and west because the master represents the rising sun. The sun, the next slide, the sun, his is the all-seeing eye in our lodges. Once again, the capital S and the word sun. Their master, meaning their president, sits in the east. Their master is a man, but he represents the rising sun. And the rising sun represents the rising god, Lucifer. Masons in America worship the sun in the east, and the Bible has told us to put them away from us. Now, I'm not advocating violence, but I am advocating that we expose the Masons as being worshipers of the sun god so that we can know who they are and then have nothing to do with them. Because if we do not do as we are commanded by the Lord God, we will get the consequences of our disobedience. We will get the new world order. May I now make this call to anyone watching this video today. If you are a Mason, check me out. And if I am right, then get out. You have been told to do so by the Lord God. He has called your worship an abomination. It is time to leave, to resign, to get out. If you know someone who is a Mason, show him this video on the subject. Let them learn who it is that they worship, and then urge them to get out. It is time to put the Masons away from us. To further prove my contention that the Masons know who it is that they are worshiping, let me continue with some of the writings of the high-ranking Masons. This is, once again, Henry C. Clausen, the past Sovereign Grand Commander of the 33rd degree Masons. This man, until he resigned, or I believe he resigned a few years ago, was the #1 Mason in the world. He has told us where it is that one learns who the sun god truly is. He has written that in this magazine, that the lodges, he has written that it is in the Masonic lodges where the true knowledge of the one supreme deity is given. It is here inside the Masonic lodge that the Mason learns who the God of the universe truly is. Now, it is commonly thought that religion is to teach mankind who the one true God is. But the Masons say that they are the ones with the true knowledge. If that is true, then humanity does not need religion. And if we don't need religion, why not abolish it? That is just another confirmation that the Masons are out to destroy religion. Now, it is a fair question to ask, who is that supreme deity? A supreme deity is one over all religions, one that is common to all, and I'm saying that Lucifer is that one supreme deity. We, the public, have it all wrong. Lucifer is the true God of the universe, and you learn that in the lodge. The Masons have told us that themselves. To show you that the Masons worship the sun as a symbol of Lucifer, let me once again quote Albert Mackey from his encyclopedia. Mr. Mackey wrote, "The sun is then presented to us in Masonry, first as a symbol of light, but then more emphatically as a symbol of sovereign authority. The sun is a symbol of a sovereign. A sovereign means one who rules. That sovereign is in authority. Their sovereign is their God, and that sovereign is Lucifer." Now let me prove that statement. Albert Pike wrote in his book entitled Morals and Dogma, "If you'll reflect, my brother, you will no doubt suspect that some secret teaching was concealed in these words. In other words, the secret is not stated directly. You have to look for it. It is concealed, but it can be found, and it is the obligation of the Mason to find it. And to prove that there is a secret, let me point this out. In one of the 2 copies of Morals and Dogma that I own, there was a stamp in the book that read, quote, "Esoteric book for Scottish Rite use only, to be returned upon withdrawal or death of the recipient." The word esoteric is defined for and understood by the specially initiated alone. Albert Pike lays the foundation for the reasons the Masons conceal their information from the average person with this thought from his book entitled Legenda. He wrote this in his book, Legenda, "Not unto all should all be made known." So Morals and Dogma conceals, as did Legenda, a secret inside its pages. And some people can see it, and some people know what that secret is. In fact, Pike wrote this on page 772. "If you desire to find and gain admission to the sanctuary, we have set enough to show you the way. If you do not, it is useless for us to say more, as it has been useless to say so much." Manly P. Hall wrote this in his book entitled The Lost Keys of Freemasonry. The initiated brother realizes that his so-called symbols and rituals are merely blinds fabricated by the wise to perpetuate ideas incomprehensible to the average individual. He also realizes that few Masons of today know or appreciate the mystic meaning concealed within these rituals. Albert Pike told us Masonry conceals its secrets from all except the adepts. I'll identify who these adepts are in a few minutes. He went on to say, or sages, or the elect, and uses false explanations and misinterpretations of its symbols. And here's the purpose: to mislead those who deserve to be misled, to conceal the truth which it calls light from them, and to draw them away from it. Pike continued, "A great number of men who believe themselves Freemasons are ignorant of the meaning of their rites and have lost the keys of their mysteries." We can know who these adepts are that Mr. Pike talked about. Kenneth Mackenzie, a Mason, told us in his book entitled The Royal Masonic Encyclopedia who these adepts were. He wrote this. He said, "Adepts, a name given to the order of the Illuminati. The Illuminati are the enlightened ones, the ones who have seen the light and understand the true meaning of the symbols. But more importantly, the Illuminati was, as we discussed, committed to the destruction of Christianity. Yet Mr. Mackenzie says that the adepts are the Illuminati. The Masons admit that they conceal the truth from their fellow Masons by the use of a lie." Albert Pike wrote, "It is for each individual Mason to discover the secret of Masonry." Notice that Mr. Pike said that there is only one secret to discover. Mr. Pike continued, "Masonry does not inculcate her truths. The word inculcate means to repeat a thought often. So what Mr. Pike is saying is that they only say it once, and you are supposed to figure it out from that one sentence or thought." He went on, "She states them once and briefly, or hints them, perhaps darkly, or interposes a cloud between them and eyes that would be dazzled by them. That rite," talking about the Scottish rite, "raises a corner of the veil even in the degree of apprentice." The degree of apprentice is, as I said before, the first degree of the Blue Lodge. For it there declares that Masonry is a worship. And it is a worship, the worship of the sun god Lucifer. The sun worshippers, called the Adept Masons, actually admit that they lie to their fellow Masons to conceal the truth from them. Albert Pike wrote, "The blue degrees are but the outer court," and the blue degrees, of course, are the first 3, "are but the outer court of the temple. Part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations." Mr. Pike adds a similar thought from page 53 of his book entitled Agenda. "Masonry permits the utterance of false interpretations which serve the double purpose of misleading the ignorant, the idle, and indolent, whom it is desirable to lead astray, and of indirectly indicating to the wise and studious the true way leading to the light." Notice that the Mason is intentionally being lied to by his fellow Masons. Mr. Pike continues in his book entitled Morals and Dogma, "It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine that he shall understand them. Their true explication is reserved for the adepts, the princes of Masonry." So the secrets of the Masonic Lodge are reserved for the adepts, the members of the Illuminati. Mr. Pike further continued that thought in his book entitled Agenda. It was never intended that the mass of Masons should know the meaning of the blue degrees. In the blue degrees, where no symbol received its true explanation. In fact, Mr. Pike called the separation of the average Mason from the adept Mason a circle within a circle. And we saw that at the very beginning of this lecture, where we drew a circle, and inside that circle put a small dot. Those inside the circle were those inside the religion, and those inside the dot knew what the true meanings of the symbols were. Pike wrote a similar thought on page 6 of his book entitled Agenda. Masonry also has its symbols, its ancient symbols, inherited from the mysteries, and intended to veil and conceal the truth from all except the adepts. Masonry gives false interpretations of its symbols. For all except a few, the road to the light is lost. And to convince even the skeptic that Albert Pike meant that the average Mason is lied to about the meaning of the symbols, he wrote this on page 27 of his book entitled Agenda. All of its symbols have a meaning, all of the symbols of the Freemasons have a concealed meaning, these containing only hints cautiously given in ideas easily misunderstood and so intended to be by all but the adepts. But he is misled by a substitute that has for him no meaning, although it indeed contains his reward if he but knew it. So the degrees will tell the initiate the truth if he can figure it out. Pike wrote, whether these degrees have for you a real value depends upon your capacity to understand them, and upon the amount of study and the degree of reflection you have bestowed upon them. No man can understand them fully without close and long study and profound thought. And he goes on to explain why they do not make their secrets known to everyone. Absolute truths are not needed for the masses. In other words, Masonry is a good program of great benefit to mankind, but all men should not know that. That does not make sense. If it is a good program, then why not share it with all of the people? Why must only the adepts get the information that is of benefit to all mankind? And the answer is simple. Albert Pike wrote this on page 32 of Legenda. The principal purpose of the mysteries was to teach the initiates the secret of holy doctrine, the theology and philosophy which the priests concealed from the vulgar as beyond and above their comprehension. So the average person cannot comprehend the truth of the secrets. We are too dumb to understand, so the Masons have decided that only those who can figure it out for themselves can learn the single truth, because only they deserve to know what it is. So the Masons and others are concealing the truth from us because we are too dumb to understand. That is why they conceal the truth from us about the New World Order. The Masons do not like the average man. They know that we are too dumb to figure it out. They know that if we knew the truth about the New World Order, we would not allow them to impose it. Because the good program of the Masons is called the New World Order, and quite simply, the New World Order is not a benefit to all mankind. Pike wrote a similar thought on page 772 of his book. If you desire to find and to gain admission to the sanctuary, we have set enough to show you the way. If you do not, it is useless for us to say more, as it has been useless to say so much. Remember that the Masons ask for light from the Masons inside the lodge. It is written into their initiation ceremony, and the initiate says that he is seeking light in response to the question as to what he's looking for. One who has told us directly who the light bearer is, of course, Albert Pike, the greatest Mason of his day. Before I quote this letter, I must qualify it. This letter showed up in a book written in the French language in 1889. The man who wrote the book was, as I remember, not a Mason. The Masons who have read this letter have disputed its authenticity. They claim it is not real. They claim that Mr. Pike never wrote it. I've read the letter in about 6 different books. I personally believe that the letter is authentic, not because I have any evidence that it is real, but because it fits with the other things we know that Albert Pike wrote, that we can confirm. So with that understanding, let me read this letter that certain people claim was written by Albert Pike in 1889. To the crowd, here Mr. Pike is referring apparently to us, the non-Masonic public. So to the crowd, we must say, we worship a God, but it is the God one adores without superstition. What he means here is that those of us who believe in the Creator God do so because it is superstition. He is saying that the existence of the Creator God cannot be proven by the human mind. The Masons believe in their God without superstition. They believe that their God is real, the other God of the Bible is not real. That is the reason I wrote my pamphlet entitled God Exists. Because you can know that a belief in the Creator God is not a superstition. It is science, proven by logic, reason, and the laws of science. Mr. Pike continues, you may repeat it to the brethren of the 32nd, 31st, and 30th degrees. All of us initiates of the high degree should maintain the Masonic religion in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine. So here Mr. Pike says that the Masons worship Lucifer, that this is the one secret contained within his writings. Notice that he says you can tell it to the high-ranking Masons, meaning the 30th, 31st, and 32nd degrees. You might recall that we read John Robinson's comments on the 30th degree, where the Masons take an oath to destroy Christianity. So this part of the letter appears to ring true as well. Mr. Pike goes on, if Lucifer were not God, would Adonai, the God of the Christians and his priests, falsely accuse and slander him? The Christians have it all backwards. The one true God is Lucifer, not their God, called Adonai. Mr. Pike's letter continued. Yes, Lucifer is God, and unfortunately Adonai is also God. Notice that he wrote that it is unfortunate that Adonai is also a God. That if the universe only had one God, and that God was Lucifer, the world would be a better place. So Mr. Pike is saying that Lucifer was the equal of Adonai. So there are, in truth, according to this Mason, two gods in the universe. One is called Adonai, the creator God, and the other is called Lucifer, the great architect of the universe. Mr. Pike went on. The true and pure philosophic religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Adonai. But Lucifer, God of light and God of good, is struggling for humanity against Adonai, the God of darkness and evil. So here we can see that the Christian community, according to Mr. Pike, has it all backwards. The God of the Bible is the God of darkness, and the God named Lucifer is the God of light. Notice everything is just the opposite. It might be instructive at this point to remember the principle of reversal. Pike wrote, what is superior is as that which is inferior, and what is below is as that which is above. So he's saying that which is above is as that which is below. Pike made a similar statement in his book entitled Agenda on page 4. Everywhere in our own holy books, we find perpetuated the old light religion. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. So Pike believes that Lucifer is the God of light. And to show you that Albert Pike is not the only one who believes that Lucifer is God, this is once again Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, a Luciferian and occultist, who wrote this, the quote we're going to read, in a book entitled The Secret Doctrine. On page 377 of this book, she wrote this, Satan, the enemy of God, is in reality the highest divine spirit. And elsewhere in her book, on page 413, she identifies Satan as the deity. She wrote this, the true theosophist, the pursuer of divine wisdom and worshiper of absolute perfection, the unknown deity. And this is further proof that what Mr. Pike has written is true. This is a typical pamphlet that was written by a Masonic lodge for those who were outside of the organization wishing to know more about it. One of these little pamphlets said this, Freemasonry has taught the ideals of equality and the importance of education in freeing mankind from prejudice, superstition, and social injustice. Notice that Pike wrote that Christianity is a belief in superstition. And here the Masons as a group are saying that they seek to free mankind from superstition. They are telling you the truth, but in a concealed language. What the pamphlet is saying is that the Masons are teaching their members to rid the world of religion. The Masons speak in a coded language. And once you understand the principle of reversal, their writings make sense. The Masons are saying that the God of the Bible is darkness, the opposite of what we think, and Lucifer, supposedly the God of darkness, is the God of light. But Albert Pike was wrong. Lucifer is not God. The Bible teaches in Isaiah chapter 43, verses 1 and 10, "Thus saith the Lord, understand that I am He. Before me there was no God formed, neither shall there be after me." The Bible continues, "I am the Lord, and there is none else. There is no God beside me." So Pike claimed that Lucifer was a god, but he was not correct. Lucifer cannot be God, he was not God, and he will not be God. So quite simply, Pike was wrong. Lucifer is not God. The Masons inside their lodge seek light. The Masons acknowledge that Lucifer is the light bearer. Others confirm this as well. Once again, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the author of the book entitled Secret Doctrine and a Luciferian, confirmed it as well. On page 513, she wrote, "Satan and Lucifer, or light bearer." Lewis Spence, in his book entitled Encyclopedia of Occultism, wrote that Lucifer was the bringer of light. Everyone, of course, knew that light came from the sun, and so the sun and Lucifer became synonymous. And the Bible confirms this as well. In 2 Corinthians verse 11, chapter 14, the Bible says, "And no marvel, for Satan is transformed into an angel of light." The word transformed is defined to change in outward shape or semblance. That means that Lucifer does not change, he only appears to change. So he is not an angel of light, he only appears to be an angel of light. Manly P. Hall confirms all that I've just quoted with this quote from his book entitled The Lost Keys of Freemasonry. Mr. Hall wrote, "The ancients taught that the sun was not a source of light, life, or power, but a medium through which life and light were reflected into physical substance. The Master Mason is, in truth, a sun, a great reflector of light." Here he was saying that man is not the light, he reflects the light from a God. He continues, "He," meaning the Master Mason, "stands between the glowing firelight and the world." And he went on, "Through him passes Hydra, the great snake, and from its mouth there pours to man the light of God. His symbol, Hydra's symbol, is the rising sun." And that is what the Bible says. But there is another claimant to being the light bearer. The Bible says in John chapter 8, verse 12, "Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life." So there are two claimants to being the light bearer, Lucifer or Jesus. We have seen that the Masons claim that Lucifer is the God of the light and that the God of the Bible is the God of darkness. We must remember the words of Albert Pike on page 16 of his book entitled Legenda. "It is a war between light and darkness, and he is right." Jesus claims in the New Testament in John chapter 8, verse 20, Jesus answered him, saying, "I spake openly to the world, and in secret have I said nothing." Jesus conceals nothing. Lucifer conceals everything. Albert Pike wrote, "The glory of God is to conceal the word, and wisdom is with those who keep secrets." So here we see that Jesus, the Son of God, is not the God of the Masons. Jesus conceals nothing, and the God of the Masons conceals everything. So there are two claimants, as I said, to being the light bearer. Lucifer, who has hidden his alleged deity in symbols and in secret rituals, and Jesus, who hid nothing and kept nothing secret. One is Lucifer, who even the Masons admit conceals that truth from the public, and Jesus, who spoke everything in public for all mankind. So each of us is going to have to make a choice between the two. There is no other option. This will be the first of my two brief religious pitches. I am an historian that has discovered an enormous truth that other historians have never found or who are keeping the truth from you. Notice that I have just proven that there is a secret religion on this earth that worships Lucifer under a concealed secret worship. that this worship is to be kept from the public except those smart enough to figure it out and then act on it. And then there's Jesus, who also claims to be the light bearer. So each of us has a choice to make. We can either believe Jesus or Lucifer. And each of us will have to make that choice because the coming new world order demands it. May I humbly suggest that you do it soon, because this new world order is coming and it will be here very, very soon. I want you to know that I am not the one saying that each of us will have to make a decision about this coming new world order. I want you to know that it is those who support the changes that are saying it. Let me show you some of those quotes. This is once again Terry Cole Whitaker. She wrote this on her book, page 89 of her book. Opposition and disbelief will have a similar lack of effect on the new world, which so many on this planet now envision. Those who oppose such a vision will, in fact, simply disappear, just as those who opposed other visions and visionaries long since have returned to dust, while the visions they so vehemently attacked live on. So those who oppose the New World Order, according to Terry Cole Whitaker, will in fact simply disappear. Two other New Agers, Lavetti Lafferty and Bud Holloway, wrote this in their book entitled The Eternal Dance. This is a time of opportunity for those who will take it. Apparently they're referring here to the New Agers. But for others, and here he's talking about those who will not accept the New World Order, meaning those who won't accept it, if the earth is unsuitable for them, meaning if they don't forget it or don't want the New World Order, they will go on to other worlds. Another spokesman of the New Age religion was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the guru sought out by the rock and roll group known as the Beatles, was quoted as saying, "There has not been and there will not be a place for the unfit." Apparently he's referring to those who will not accept the New World Order. He said the fit will lead, and if the unfit are not coming along, meaning if they will not accept the New Age religion, there is no place for them. In the age of enlightenment, there is no place for ignorant people. Non-existence of the unfit has been the law of nature. This is what this man taught the Beatles, 30-some years ago. Ruth Montgomery, another New Ager, added her thoughts on the subject. The souls who helped to bring on this chaos of the present century, and I believe she's referring to those who do not believe in the New Age, will have passed into spirit to rethink their attitudes. And she went on, and millions will survive and millions won't. Those who won't will go into the spirit state. John Randolph Price is another New Ager, and he made an estimate of the number who will not survive the transfer. Mr. Price was told by his spirit guide, a spirit guide is someone apparently that talks to Mr. Price, that up to 2.5 billion might perish in the coming chaos. 2.5 billion is about 1/2 of the population of the world. That means that 1/2 of the people on earth today will not be here after the New World Order is imposed. So hold on, this is not very pleasant. But perhaps the most frightening statement made by any New Ager that I am not familiar with came from the pen of Barbara Marx Hubbard, a New Ager who wrote this in her book entitled Happy Birthday Earth. The choice is, do you wish to become a natural Christ, a universal human, or do you wish to die? People will either change or die. That is the choice. And to show you that this thought was not hers alone, I would like to point out that Lord Maitreya, this so-called Christ, said it in 1979, what we're about to read. I'd like to return to Benjamin Krem's book entitled The Reappearance of the Christ and the Masters of Wisdom that I've quoted from before. He has published Lord Maitreya's teachings on September the 12th, 1979 in his entirety on page 246 of his book. I would like to quote only a part of it. This is what Lord Maitreya taught us, 1979. Man must change or die. There is no other course. When you see this, you will gladly take up my cause and show that for man exists a future bathed in light. It is true, unfortunately, you will either accept the New World Order or die. I'm sorry that I must be so blunt, but notice that I did not say this. Those who support the New World Order said it. Notice that I'm not saying this without any proof. I'm quoting the experts, those who believe in the New World Order. You cannot fault my research. I'm reading the experts. This is real because I found the writings of those who believe it. So I am not the only one saying that each of us will be given a choice. We will either accept or reject the New World Order. And those who reject it will go into the spirit state. Another New Ager once wrote a similar thought about purging the earth of those who will not accept the new future. His name was Adolf Hitler, the German New Ager, who fought World War II to give the world a new world order. He killed up to 50 million people and felt no remorse. So Adolf Hitler also was a believer, and those who would not accept the New World Order died, and over 50 million did. This is what Adolf Hitler wrote. I have the right to exterminate millions of individuals of inferior races which multiply like vermin. And the reason why these New Agers do not tremble when they write about the death of billions of people was stated by Alice Bailey, one of the New Agers. She wrote, "Death is not a disaster to be feared. The work of the destroyer is not really cruel or undesirable. Therefore, there is much destruction permitted by the custodians of the plan and much evil turned into good." Notice I'm quoting the writers of this material themselves, those who believe in it. So there is a battle being waged between Lucifer and Jesus. And I found it as a historian. I have found it as any historian could have if he or she had only looked. And some are predicting that Lucifer will win that war. Albert Pike said this in his book entitled Morals and Dogma. Light will finally overcome darkness. Here's another author who is saying basically the same thing. The Magian philosophers tell us that Ormuzd sprang originally from the purest light and Ahriman from the most profound darkness. According to Pike's principle of reversal, Ormuzd is Lucifer and Ahriman is the God of the Bible. He went on, then the former, meaning Ormuzd, the concealed Lucifer, adorned the heaven with stars. Notice that he is capitalizing the word, so he is not talking about the stars that shine in the sky at night, but he means something else. Quite possibly he's talking about the masters that we've been talking about for all the time of this lecture. So the masters are the stars, placing the sun in front of all the rest. So these gods are to contend with varied success, at the end of at which time Ahriman, meaning the God of the Bible, is to be destroyed, and mankind for the future to live in perfect happiness. According to Albert Pike, light, represented by the wisdom of Lucifer, will finally overcome the God of the Bible. He repeated that thought with a little more detail on page 287 of his book. You see, my brother, what is the meaning of Masonic light. You see why the east of the lodge, where the initial letter of the name of the deity overhangs the master, is the place of light. Light, as contradistinguished from darkness, is good, as contradistinguished from evil. And it is that light, the true knowledge of deity, the eternal good, for which Masons in all ages have sought. Still, Masonry marches steadily toward that light that shines in the great distance. That light of the day when evil, overcome and vanquished, evil meaning the God of the Bible, shall fade away and disappear forever, and life and light will be the one law of the universe. Benjamin Krem also claims that Maitreya foresees total victory for the forces of light. And he went on to say that those who object to the New World Order can do nothing to prevent it. Benjamin Creme wrote, "Nothing can prevent the inauguration of this era of tranquility and equilibrium." And Albert Pike feels that this victory was only a short time away from 1871 when he wrote his book entitled Morals and Dogma. He wrote, "We can look on all the evils of the world and see that it is only the hour before sunrise and that the light, capital L again, is coming." Mr. Pike went on to say a little about what is going to happen about after light conquers the darkness of the Bible. He wrote this, "The sign of the truth is about to appear, and the veil which concealed it will be withdrawn. And what this sign of the truth is not to be told except in a concealed manner." He wrote, "It is for you to discover this law and this secret for yourself. The initiate learns by reflection and not by committing," I'm sorry, one slide behind here. "The initiate learns by reflection and not by committing words and definitions to memory. This battle has been going on since the beginning of time and has been called the battle between good and evil. And we live in the generation that will decide the final outcome." Someone else who thought that light would overcome darkness was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, the famous composer. There's a picture of Wolfgang at a very young age playing those days, the harpsichord. This is a book by Paul Nettie, an internationally respected musical authority, entitled Mozart and Masonry. This book details some of the evidence that Mozart was a Mason and wrote several of his operas to conceal Masonic truths. For instance, Mozart wrote Gesellenreise, meaning fellow craft's journey, just before his father became a second-degree Mason. The second degree of Masonry is called the fellow craft. Mozart wrote a second song to be performed at the opening of a particular Masonic lodge. And third, he wrote a third song, to be performed at the closing of that lodge, and a fourth entitled Mauer Freud, meaning Mason's Joy. Please forgive me for not pronouncing these words correctly, but that is the best I can do under the circumstances because I don't speak German. One of the greatest operas that Mozart wrote was called The Magic Flute. Before I comment on that, I must read a few of the comments made by Professor Nettie, who must be a member of the Masons, although he does not say he is. He writes this, "Among intellectual forces of the 18th century, none is of such fundamental importance as Freemasonry. It is significant because it combined all of the humanitarian teachings of its time." He writes about its alleged ideal of humanitarianism, its flowering since World War II, and its chief attractions. Mr. Nettie says Masonry keeps no secrets from the uninitiated, and of course we've been examining that and find that's not true. Yet there is a Masonic secret, a mystery, an experience that cannot be taught or explained, because it lies, like every mystic experience, beyond the realm of controlled consciousness. And then he says that the secret of Freemasonry is the secret of experiencing true love for all mankind, a positive attitude towards man and life, and broad affirmation of God. He said, "It is the realization that beyond the dark and material world, there is a realm of light towards which all men must strive." So it appears as if Mr. Nettie has not studied Masonry long enough nor deeply enough to see that what he sees is simply not the truth. He has been deluded by his study of the craft. But overlooking his patronage of Masonry, his book adds an important piece of the puzzle to the understanding of its role in the past. Mr. Nettie wrote about the use of classical music as a way of propagandizing the elite of a society for the cause of Lucifer worship. Because Mozart was using his work, The Magic Flute, as a way of informing those who attended the opera that Masonry has a great allure to those who joined it. The author calls The Magic Flute one of the greatest artworks of all time, and says that it was the direct result of Mozart's Masonic associations, because the Magic Flute glorifies the Masonic ideal. There are some who believe that Mozart revealed too much in the Magic Flute and that he was poisoned by the members of the Masonic Lodge. And the reason for that belief lies in the fact that his first performance of the opera was on September the 30th, 1791, and he died on December the 5th of the same year. There are stories that his hands and feet began to swell and that he was vomiting just before he died. There are those who believe that these are signs of poisoning. His official cause of death was rheumatic fever causing a heart attack. So we will never know. So if the Masons killed Mozart, the world will never know of their act of murder. So I'd like to examine a little about the opera and see if we can determine just what it was that Mozart wrote that glorified the Masonic ideal. The hero of the opera is Tamino, the son of a king, and he is promised the hand of Pamina, the daughter of a queen, if he will rescue her from a man named Sarastro. And the hero begins his journey. He ends up locating Pamina and Sarastro and finds her after she has escaped the king. For some reason not made known in the video presentation of the opera, Tamino decides that he and Pamina must be initiated into a group that Mozart calls the Brotherhood. Now, these are some pictures taken from a copy of the opera that I have, and we're going to have to read. We'll read the words, but they're in the captions in the white. They might not show up on the screen. But these three women attempt to warn Tamino, shown there in the blue outfit with the little red on the shoulder. These women attempt to warn Tamino about the Masons. They say, if you join the Brotherhood, you will surely end in hell. I think their opinion is a little strong, but it's interesting to note that Mozart was trying to say that there were at least two sides of the Masonic question. But Tamino determines that he will be initiated, and the three women give him a magic flute and tell him that it will protect him as he journeys through the trials of the initiation. They further tell him that the magic flute will increase human happiness. But it is my opinion that the flute is a symbol of a truth. The flute, in my opinion, is a symbol of the truth that Lucifer is the god of the Masons, and that knowledge will protect you, and that knowledge will protect you from the evil Christians. That truth will increase human happiness after all men live in the New World Order. I believe that Mozart understood the Masonic Lodge's roles in creating the New World Order. So the next part of the opera concerns itself with the initiation of Tamino. I want to point out that women do not accompany their boyfriends or husbands as they go through the Masonic initiation today, but in the opera, for some unexplained reason, Pamina accompanies him. However, she walks behind him with her left hand on his left shoulder. The implication is that she is going through the initiation not as an equal, but as the future wife of Tamina. This slide shows Tamino, shown on the left, as he prepares to enter the temple. This slide does not show it very clearly, but the temple is a giant pyramid with only this, the front door, visible. Notice that there are two obelisks near the temple, one on each side of the door. Three boys, played by three young women, reveal the nature of the ceremony that Pamina will go through. And this is what they sing in the song. There's these three young women portraying three young boys. Soon the sun will rise. Mortals will be as gods. Superstition will vanish. And wisdom will triumph. This is what they sing to the audience. This is the future. I believe they're talking here about the New World Order. So here we see the reason, I believe, that Mozart was murdered. He revealed the nature of the Masonic initiation. The Masons, represented by wisdom, will finally overcome superstition, meaning Christianity. So Mozart understood the exact nature of Freemasonry. Very simply, Mozart knew. Meanwhile, back in the temple, the brothers assemble for the initiation. Notice that they are all wearing blue cloaks. The first 3 degrees of the Masonic Lodge are called the Blue Lodge. I don't know, but I think that this is another amazing coincidence. The king, Sarastro, tells the Brotherhood that Tamino, the hero of the opera, wants to be initiated. The master addresses the lodge as the servants of Osiris and Isis. And we've been showing you in the quotes from the past that Osiris was the sun god, a symbol of Lucifer. The Brotherhood then votes to accept Tamino as a new brother. There they are raising their hands in voting. And Tamino says, my God is wisdom. There he is before he goes into initiation. And he said, my prize is Pamina. He's going to be married to Pamina if he goes through the initiation. So Tamino understood before he is initiated. Notice that Tamino's head is covered with a hood, which is an accurate recording of what actually happens during a Masonic initiation. The king says, O Isis and Osiris, grant wisdom to this new couple, meaning Pamino and Tamina. At the end of the opera, Tamino and Pamina approach the king during the last stages of the initiation. And shown here, Tamino and Pamina have completed the initiation. Notice the huge sun and its radiant beams extending from the semicircle. There is no question that this is a sun, and it appears that Mozart understood the hidden concealed message of the Masonic Lodge and that he put it in the opera. And that is the reason I believe he was murdered. Let's go back to this book. We talked about it in another context, but this is the book entitled Jack the Ripper by Stephen Knight. We've already talked about it, but he says this about the death of Mozart. It is known that Vienna's highest Masons were angry at Mozart leaving the Brotherhood in his last years, and they were outraged over what they regarded as a betrayal of their secrets in the magic flute. To this day, and meaning 1986, when Mr. Knight wrote the book, no one knows where Mozart's body is buried. So it is conceivable that Mozart was poisoned and then buried so that no one would ever find the body and discover the evidence of the poisoning. So there appears to be evidence that the Masons will murder if they believe that they have to. I next would like to discuss the pyramid and the all-seeing eye as symbols. And I'd like to start by examining the pyramid on the back side of the dollar bill. Notice that the pyramid has an all-seeing eye that we've discussed before. We're going to continue to discuss as we discuss the pyramid. It is an interesting question as to why our founding fathers decided to put this pyramid on our Great Seal. Because to my knowledge, there are no stone pyramids in the United States. This is the official position of what the U.S. Treasury Department tells us about the pyramid on our Great Seal. The pyramid is the symbol of strength, and its unfinished condition denoted the belief of the designers of the Great Seal that there was still work to be done. Notice that the pyramid on the dollar bill is not complete. The top is flat, and the eye is above the pyramid. So this couldn't be a symbol of the founding of the Republic. It has another meaning. E. Raymond Capt, a writer on the subject of the Great Seal and its symbols, wrote this: the triangle in connection with the all-seeing eye is the Masonic symbol of the grand architect of the universe. So Mr. Capt connects the all-seeing eye with the pyramid and the pyramid with the Masonic Lodge. The pyramid of the Great Seal is a model of the Great Pyramid of Giza outside of Cairo, Egypt. And we'll come back to that pyramid in a few moments. Here, for instance, is a copy of the Great Seal of the state of Colorado. Notice that the state also uses the all-seeing eye in a pyramid form just above the shield and above the thing called I forgot the name of the middle thing. So I won't talk about that. But above all those symbols is the eye with the pyramid. Notice that the state also uses the all-seeing eye in a pyramid form. So it is not just the federal government that understands the significance of the all-seeing eye and its connection with the pyramid. The people who conceived the flag or the seal of Colorado did so as well. So we can see that the pyramid, the all-seeing eye, and the twin obelisks are all Masonic symbols, as we're showing you here in the last few minutes. I'd like to now return to the study of the pyramid. The Masons acknowledge that the pyramid in Cairo was not a tomb or a burial chamber, but in truth was a temple of initiation. The October 1953 edition of the New Age magazine, published by the Masons, contained an article on the Great Pyramid. This is what it said: if perchance you were to visit the Great Pyramid of Giza, the one outside Cairo, you would be presented with a souvenir stating that Osiris commanded Thalmes to build him a house in the form of a pyramid with certain designated passageways. Notice that the pyramid was built for Osiris, the Egyptian sun god, who wanted a house to live in. The Masons are admitting that the pyramid was built as a house, as a place for the sun god Osiris to live. They are correct. The pyramid was not built as a burial tomb for a pharaoh. It was not built as a tomb for anyone. It was built as a house for a sun god. In fact, the Great Pyramid was once covered with dazzling white casing stones, which could be seen from great distances because it captured and reflected the sun's rays. This is a picture of a few of the only remaining casing stones still part of the original structure. Apparently, it acted in part as a visible reminder of the sun god who lived inside it, because many could see it from miles away because of its reflected light. This is a book called The Pyramids, an Enigma Solved, written by Joseph Davidowitz and Margie Morris. They have confirmed that the pyramid was not built as a tomb, but as a temple for a sun god. They wrote this on page 182. Khufu, and Khufu was the name of the pharaoh who built the pyramid, named the monument, his monument, the pyramid, which is the place of the sunrise and sunset. The name depicted the pyramid as the throne of the sun god Ra during his daily course across the heavens. Now, this is a cross-section of the pyramid. The pyramid is entered from the entrance to your right, where we got the red arrow, and the visitor then enters what is called the descending passageway, also shown in red on this picture. After walking a short time, he comes to what is called the ascending passageway. He has a choice here, and he can either continue walking down the descending passageway, or he can start his walk up what has been called the ascending passageway, shown in orange on the picture. After a while, he comes to another choice. He can walk on a level walkway into what has been called the Queen's Chamber, shown in green on the picture, or he can enter a large room called the Grand Gallery, shown in purple. When he completes his walk through the Grand Gallery, he can enter what has been called the King's Chamber, shown in yellow. The King's Chamber was built supposedly as the burial room of a pharaoh, but notice that the Masons claim that the pyramid was not built as a tomb, it was built as a house for a sun god. This is a photograph of what they call the King's Room. The box the man is standing beside is supposed to be the tomb of a pharaoh, but there was no pharaoh inside when the first modern visitors entered the room. There was no other paraphernalia in the room. It was completely empty. That box was not built as a burial tomb. It was built as a box in which an initiate is laid during an initiation ceremony. And to show you that the builders of the pyramid knew that, let's look at the cross-section of the pyramid again. Those black lines leading off on both sides of the two large rooms in the pyramid, the Queen's Chamber, shown in green, and the King's Chamber, shown in yellow, are air vents. They extend all the way through the pyramid to the outside air. Their purpose is to get oxygen into the rooms. That means that the builders anticipated that there would be oxygen breathing people in those rooms. If these rooms were built as tombs, the last thing the builders would want is in the room was oxygen, because the Egyptians knew that oxygen destroys decaying human flesh. If they were burying their pharaoh for eternity, the last thing they wanted in the room was oxygen. Somewhere in my reading in the past, and I don't remember exactly where I read this, I read a story that was written about the opening of one of those tombs of a pharaoh. As I remember, the archaeologist had to break through a wax seal around the entranceway into the tomb to enter the room. The doorway had blocks that were precisely cut so that hardly any air could get into the room, and the wax had been used to completely ensure that no air would get inside the burial chamber. The people who buried the pharaoh left behind several torches in the room that were being allowed to burn off all of the oxygen inside of the room after they had pushed the blocks into the doorway and then sealed the doorway with wax. The torches would, of course, die out after all the oxygen was burned up. The reason they went to all of this trouble was to preserve the body as well as they could after burial. As I remember, the first archaeologist into the room said that the air was putrid because there was no oxygen in it, because the Egyptians knew. And if they knew that that was true, why would they put air vents into the tomb of the pyramid as they did in the pyramid itself? Now, this is a picture of the author Peter Tompkins examining one of these air shaft openings. The Masons of today also know that the pyramid near Cairo was built as a temple of initiation to the sun god. Wilfred Gregson, an architect and a 33rd degree Mason, wrote in a New Age magazine, obviously the idea was to get air moving into the pyramid. You can't exist very long breathing stagnant air. So my principle is that this was a temple of initiation, and it was. The pyramid was a temple of initiation into the secret worship of Osiris, the sun god, the secret worship of Lucifer. Other Masons have confirmed this as well. Manly P. Hall, the 33rd degree Mason, has written, the pyramids, the great temples Egyptian temples of initiation. He wrote, the illumined of antiquity entered its portals as men, they came forth as gods. So the pyramid has a specific function, to make gods out of men after they were initiated into Lucifer worship. And to confirm that, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky wrote the following on page 462 of her book entitled The Secret Doctrine. The king's chamber in Cheops pyramid is thus an Egyptian holy of holies. On the days of the mysteries of initiation, the candidate, representing the solar god, had to descend into the sarcophagus and represent the energizing ray. Emerging from it on the following morning, he typified the resurrection of life after the change called death. In the great mysteries, his figurative death lasted 2 days, when with the sun, notice here that she capitalized the word sun. This is a different death from the one listed before. Here she is talking about the death of Lucifer, the sun god. When with the sun, he arose on the third morning. The Bible records that Jesus arose on the third day, so this is once again a substitute of the phony resurrection in simultation of the real thing. Blavatsky wrote this in volume 1 of her book entitled The Secret Doctrine. The sarcophagus was the baptismal font upon emerging from which the neophyte was born again and became an adept. So those who study the pyramid and tell you that it was built as a tomb for the burial of a pharaoh are simply not telling you the truth. And the fact that the pyramid is a temple of initiation into Lucifer worship will play a major role in a drama that is going to unfold very, very shortly, as I will explain a little later. Next, I'd like to discuss the lion as a symbol. Manly P. Hall is certainly aware of the significance of the lion as a symbol. This is a drawing in his book entitled The Secret Teachings of All Ages, entitled The Lion of the Sun. Perhaps you cannot see it, but he has a lion laying down in front of the sun. Albert Pike wrote that there is a connection between the two. The Egyptians put lions under the throne of Horus, this being the name of the sun. And this is a drawing of a Greek coin showing the serpent's head on the body of showing the lion's head on the body of a serpent. Notice this time that the lion's head has 13 rays emanating from it. This coin shows the connection between the lion, the snake, and the number 13. Also in Egyptian hieroglyphics, the lion represented a rebirth. Notice that the table that this body is resting on has a lion's head at one end and his tail on the other. The table was where the priest prepared the deceased for his trip into the afterlife. This is a picture of a drawing of a Mayan hieroglyph. Notice that this table shows heads of 2 lions and what appears to be a god sitting on the table. Here is a drawing of a woman riding on a serpent bottom and lion's head. It appears that she is riding on a combination of the lion and the serpent as she seeks out wisdom. The Masons use the lion as a symbol as well. This is a slide of the lion's head inside a symbol of the sun on the front door of the Masonic Temple in Washington, D.C. As I've said before, the lion is a symbol of eternal life, and it appears as if the Masons are saying that you can reach eternal life to the sun god if you but open this door of the Masonic Lodge. So they are saying that it is not religion, but entrance into the Masonic Lodge that will lead you into eternal life. This is once again the book written by Manly P. Hall entitled The Lost Keys of Freemasonry. Mr. Hall shows this drawing on page 3 of the book. And you'll notice that there is a person inside a box about the size of the box in the pyramid. And on his right, reaching down, is a man dressed with a lion's head on. The caption underneath the picture reads, "This picture shows how the grip of the lion's paw was given in the pyramid mysteries." The priest wore a mask of a lion over his head. I'll explain why the lion's head is used in this part of the initiation in a few minutes. Mr. Hall continues, "By this grip, the spirit in man, long buried in the sepulchre of substance, is raised to life, and the candidate goes forth as a builder entitled to the wages of an initiate. So now we can see that there was initiation in the pyramid and that it represented a process that made the initiate into a master mason. The Masons have a similar ceremony inside their Masonic rituals and initiation ceremonies. This is what Albert Pike says on page 373 of his book entitled Morals and Dogma. Initiation was considered to be a mystical death, a death into the infernal regions. And the perfect epopt, that's the way I'll pronounce it, I don't know how to pronounce that word. Mr. Pike does not define the word, but it appears to mean an initiated Mason, was then said to be regenerated, newborn, restored to a renovated existence of light, a life, light, and purity. And then on page 388, he writes about another initiation ceremony, this time a ceremony into the ancient mystery religion of Isis worship. Isis was first the mother and then the wife of Osiris, the sun god of ancient Egypt. Mr. Pike wrote, "Wherefore the goddess, in the wisdom of her divinity, hath been accustomed to select those who may through her providence be in a manner born again and commence the career of a new existence." Another who wrote about the Luciferic initiation was David Spangler, a New Age religion and author I've quoted before. He wrote this in his 1978 book entitled Reflections on the Christ. The true light of Lucifer cannot be seen through sorrow, through darkness, through rejection. Here he admits that the light of Lucifer cannot be seen through darkness. What he was saying, since he and others believe that religion is darkness, is that man cannot know the true nature of Lucifer through religion. Mr. Spangler goes on, Lucifer works within each of us to bring us to wholeness, and as each of us moves into a new day, each of us in some way is brought to that point which I term the Luciferic initiation. The particular doorway, I'm sorry, I was one slide behind there. Each of us in some way is brought to that point which I term the Luciferic initiation. The particular doorway through which the individual must pass, if he is to come fully into the presence of his light and his wholeness, Lucifer comes to give us the final gift of wholeness, and if we accept it, then he is free and we are free. That is the Luciferic initiation. It is the one that many people now will be facing, for it is an initiation into the new age. So Mr. Spangler was saying that each of us will be given a choice, and if we accept it, we'll be initiated into Lucifer worship. And on page 428, Mr. Pike discusses another of the initiation ceremonies, this time the one in India. This is what he says about the third degree in those ceremonies. The third degree initiate was then said to be born again. So some of those initiated into the ancient mystery religion are said to be born again. We'll discuss this in the next section of the lecture today. Since there are Christians who go through a biblically based experience called being born again to Jesus, it is important for the public to now ask of those claiming to be born again to whom? Jesus or Lucifer? I will explain why this is significant in a few minutes, and all of what I've said about the pyramid will come together. This is a drawing of a sign given by the Masons called the lion's paw in a book about the Masonic initiation ceremony. It is made by making a semi-fist of the right hand and then placing it over the heart. This is a picture of a small statue of Khufu, the builder of the pyramid. This little statue is probably 5,000 or 6,000 years old. Notice that he is giving the lion's paw sign. This statue is, as I said, about 5,000 to 6,000 years old, and it shows the lion's paw being given by the builder of the pyramid. And so obviously it's very old. This is a statue of the Egyptian high priest Cal giving what appears to be the sign for the lion's paw again. According to the article that accompanied this picture, the high priest served all three pharaohs who built pyramids on the plateau at Giza, Egypt. This is a picture of Karl Marx, the so-called father of communism, giving the same sign, although in this case he's concealing the sign underneath his coat. This was a common way during the past to conceal the fact that the person was a member of the Luciferian worship. Karl Marx was a Satan worshiper. This is a picture of John Wilkes Booth, the assassin of Abraham Lincoln, giving the same sign. John Wilkes Booth was a member of the Knights Templar Masons. It is interesting to remember that after Booth had assassinated President Abraham Lincoln, he shouted out, "Sic semper tyrannis," which means thus always to tyrants. What Booth was saying was that murder is the desirable end to anyone they consider to be a tyrant. History does not satisfactorily explain why Booth believed that President Lincoln was a tyrant. But I believe that the real explanation is that Booth considered Christians to be tyrants and Lincoln was a Christian. Pike added this confirmation to the thought: the freedom of man lies in his reason. Apparently man is being kept a slave by Christianity, and tyranny is a form of governmental slavery. Pike continued, Satan is not a person but a force created for good. It is the instrument of liberty or free will. Here again we see the thought that religion makes one a slave and reason frees the individual, because Pike believed that faith and reason were not the same. He wrote this on page 296 of Morals and Dogma. Faith and reason are not opposites, but antagonistic and hostile to each other. But Mr. Pike was wrong. Faith, meaning religion, and reason, meaning man's ability to know good from evil himself, are opposites. This is what I've been trying to illustrate for most of this lecture. This is a picture of Annie Besant, a Satan worshiper, giving the same sign. She's the only woman that I can find giving that sign, but there she is. This is a picture of Jesse James, the famous outlaw, who's on the left, and Frank James, his older brother, on the right, giving a similar sign. Jesse's hand is placed a little differently than is Frank's, quite possibly indicating that he is not a master mason yet, but is a lower degree mason. It is known that Jesse James later became a 33rd degree mason. What these pictures illustrate is that those who have been born again to Lucifer have a secret sign that they use to let others know that they have been said to be born again. They are said to be born again to Lucifer. And this is a picture. Hold on, Christians, this is not very pleasant. This is a picture of Pat Robertson, the Christian evangelist, giving the same lion's paw sign on the cover of the February 17th, 1986 issue of Time magazine. Now, I must be honest, I cannot testify that Pat Robertson knew what he was doing when he was asked by the photographer at Time magazine to stand this way with his right arm in this position. All I can do is show you what the strange sign means in Masonic terms. It is quite likely that Pat Robertson did not know that he was giving the Masonic sign, that he had been born again to Lucifer, the Masonic God. But if that is true, why did Pat agree to having his portrait taken for the magazine when he did not know what he was being asked to do with his right arm? Most people would at least question it and say that they would refuse such an unusual request. I've heard that Pat has an explanation for this strange picture. He reportedly told a fellow minister that the reason he was standing this way for the cover was because he had fallen off a horse and injured his right arm. You can decide for yourself whether that story makes sense. But I would like to discuss another enigma about Pat Robertson. Pat has written a book called The New World Order. This book was published in 1991 after my book by the same name came out in August of 1990. But Pat Robertson's book raises some very disturbing questions. He starts by saying this on page 9 of his book. It is my firm belief that the events of public policy are not the accidents and coincidences we are generally led to believe. Mr. Robertson was admitting that there was a conspiracy. So it's quite clear that Mr. Robertson